Good evening, listeners. You're listening to the Lament of Hope blog and podcast. Um, it's a gift today. I'm actually speaking with, I've been blessed a lot the past few months to speak with several musicians, but today I'm speaking with Kurt Bestor, who is a musician as well as a composer. He's done music for, I think it's over 40 films, right, Kurt? Among commercials and other
That's
things.
40 and still counting, hopefully.
Yeah. He's based in Utah. Um, Kurt, kind of to get started, I was seeing in your bio especially, but I think for me hearing your music from Rigoletto, which is
Hmm.
for those of you seen it, it's an old film from like I think what is the early 90s. But I love that film and you seem to really love storytelling in your music. Um, and I wanted to ask, like, what is your philosophy for storytelling when you're writing music? Um, what do you want it to convey? Like for each song, do you have a story of your own as you're creating it, or what kind of is your philosophy of creating that
Yeah,
story?
so that's a good observation, Danielle. I have a hard time just writing notes, just writing harmonies, just writing music in its pure, in its art, in its artistic form. I'm sorry, in its crafty form. I tend to write more artistic. So for me, obviously Rigoletto, you referenced that had a story. So in that, I'm trying, there were lyrics, and that was a little easier one to write because I was trying to fit the story of the movie. But most of my music is actually instrumental. And even on the instrumental pieces that I do, and whether it be for an orchestra or piano or violin or whatever I do, I'm always trying to convey some kind of, you say story. I think that's probably a good way to put it. But when I don't have lyrics, it's really, I'm trying to take the listener on a little ride, an arc. I'm trying to say, okay, here's where you start. Now I'm going to kind of rip your heart out. Then I'm going to let you back down. Then we're going to go to another place and then another place. And then hopefully I'll surprise you with a couple twists and turns with the music. And finally, hopefully I'll let you back to where you started. My songs have a tendency to do that. It's not something intellectually that I think about, but it's something that seems to always happen.
What do you think's been the hardest music piece for you to kind of capture something that you thought sounded like a story to you?
Well, I mean, I just did a project called The Redeemer. It's biblical based, and it's this one song I wrote called "From Every Pore," which is for a solo violin and orchestra. And it's an original piece, and I was trying to paint the picture for your listeners that are familiar with the Bible story of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. There's stuff that goes on, and it's not just he kneels down and prays. He kneels down. I was trying in the song to convey some kind of fear almost from his human side, saying,
Yeah.
I'm scared of this. This is, can I do this? And then, I have so that's the solo violin represents the Savior's voice. Then I have representing who I'm assuming God is chatting with him because that's what the prayer is all about. Even though in the scriptures it doesn't have words that he might say, but I'm assuming. So I put a cello. So you hear this violin and a cello having a dialogue. And then later on in the scriptural story, there's an angel that comes and comforts at the very end. So I have a female soprano, wordless soprano coming in and joining that as well. And if you listen to the song From Every Pore, hopefully the audience will feel that. Now, if they're not believers or they're not familiar with the story, they're still going to say, wow, that really moved me. That really touched my soul. I wonder where that came from. But if people do know the story, they'll go, oh, wow, that took me right there. So the music can be understood on several levels, and that's another thing I'm kind of about. I really, I really like to reach all kinds of people wherever they are. I don't assume anything. I don't want to tell them too much. I did tell you quite a bit about that song, but most of the time, I want to put the song out there and let it take you where you are, where you want to go.
Was that the hardest song for you to kind of capture that picture that you had in your mind, or?
Yeah, it was very difficult for me because, first of all, I was doing it for a client who is very, very religious in her beliefs. and she already came to the story with some very incredibly strong feelings.
Okay.
I'm a spiritual person. I might even say religious, but our isms don't necessarily dissect. So I wanted to kind of first of all understand where she was, but also I wanted to understand the story. And so I read it several times in different versions of the biblical, different types of Bibles, just to kind of get an idea now, what could this really be? I have been to Jerusalem before, so I remember, the place that is purported to be where he would have said that prayer. So I kind of put all that together. It was very difficult though, because the expectation of the listeners that are going to hear it, and I'm going to be performing it the next week in Arizona with an orchestra and choir. They're coming expecting big things because that's
Yeah.
the story that they value a lot, and that's very hard to do. I mean, I hope I don't let them down. I feel really good about what I did, what I wrote. I feel musically very good about it. It's oftentimes I write in kind of a crossover classical style, which is a little more accessible. This is still tonal, but it's pretty heady stuff, but it's super emotional. And I don't know, your listeners will have to take a listen and see how I did. But when I perform it with an orchestra and a choir and my friend, the violinist, it feels right to me.
Is there a piece of music you've written that you think kind of expresses who you are as an individual?
So that's a question worth pondering, but I'll try not to ponder too long. Um, there are a few. I would say the one that people, some of your listeners might not even know that I wrote this song. There's a song called "Prayer of the Children" that many people have listened to with choirs all around the world. It gets sung everywhere. When I meet somebody and they say, "What have you written?" If I say that, they go, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know you wrote that song." But
Mm.
it's a song that I wrote when I was frustrated. I was frustrated by war, and there's things in the world going on right now that make me feel that same feeling. And unfortunately, the song still applies. But I wrote this song way back in '95 when there was a war in the former country of Yugoslavia where I lived. I had lived there, and I love the people of Serbia. I love the people of Croatia, Bosnia. That was one country. Now they were all fighting and
Yeah.
killing each other. And I was so frustrated by that because I'm kind of a super peaceful, loving guy. I said, what can I do? So I wrote a song for the children. And it's a prayer that is not, it doesn't come from any particular religion. It could even be sung by someone who didn't really believe, but who believed in love of children and family and so forth. It's a song that is my attempt to say, listen to the children praying. They didn't ask for war. They didn't ask for this. And yet they are many times the ultimate victim. They are not going to have mom and dad to come home. They're not going to have a place to go to school or play. They want the simple things in life. And here we are fighting wars over goofy things, that
Yeah.
money and power. And so I wrote the song as kind of just my own little offering, and then I put it aside. I didn't even sing it because I'm not really a singer. I'm more of a composer. So I didn't perform it anywhere. I put it aside. Then one concert, I just kind of pulled it out. It's sung with a machine that splits my voice into parts.
Mm.
And so it makes me sound like a choir. And when I sing, I sing like one note and then I play four other notes and it splits my voice into all those parts. So the
Mm.
first time I recorded it, that song makes me sound kind of like a Gregorian chant. It's kind of like hopefully it's and people say that this God sounds so surreal and it's so emotional. So I sang it and the response from the audience was unlike anything I've ever had in concert. They didn't applaud right away. They kind of paused when it was over and kind of took their breath away and then they applauded. And that was the best moment. I thought,
Mm.
wow, this was communicated with other people. So I've probably gone way beyond the question, but that song, if I die tomorrow, it will probably be the song that I will have felt like I my soul got portrayed and my
Yeah.
feelings and my deepest thoughts.
Were you in because it's former it wasn't Yugoslavia at the time, right?
It was Yugoslavia when I lived there. Yeah, I had been. It was the country of Yugoslavia. They didn't have their war till the beginning of the 90s. I was
That's
there
right.
way back in the late 70s.
And that's when
And
they
so,
split. Okay.
yeah, they split and they, it's an example of a country that where lots of people had a lot of differences. And there's an analogy maybe to where we are today. And I still have those feelings now in my own country, but there were people who were Croatian. They were typically Catholic. In World War II, they were allied with Hitler, although today they would be embarrassed by that. But anyway, at that time, then there were the Serbians. They're Orthodox, similar to Catholicism, but if you know your religion, they split back in the early days. So they're over here. Then you have the people in Bosnia who are Muslim,
Yeah.
and they were kept together. This whole country was kept together by a strong man named Tito, who was the president. And when he died, everybody said, now we go be our own country. And they just split apart and started fighting, ethnic cleansing, all the stuff you read about. So that was what set up the song. Um, I still
Because
sing that song today, and it still gets sung by a lot of people, by choirs. It's sung every year at the 9/11 commemoration at Ground Zero. It gets sung in Columbine for the children who died in that shooting years ago. It unfortunately gets sung. I translated the last phrase from Croatian into Ukrainian. And when I sing it
yeah,
now, I've been singing it Ukrainian, or I'll sing it in Hebrew or Arabic. I try because I want everybody when they hear the song to just feel like it's not meant for anybody to own. It's only meant to express that we have children who are suffering at the hands of their parents and our violent tendencies. So,
I was gonna ask, did you ever read the book Island of the World? Because isn't that what there's a book that was written by a man who lived during that time, and he was talking about the ethnic cleansing that happened, and it was very traumatic for him. I mean, it kind of just defined.
hmm.
Um,
I did not read that. Sounds interesting to know if it's about that time period.
yeah,
I'd love to read it.
I was gonna ask, were you like there during the war? Did you see it yourself, or was it something that you ended up leaving before it got really bad?
No, I left before. There's actually
Okay.
stories that are erroneous about me on the internet that talk about, oh, I worked in a hospital and then the hospital during the war got bombed and I was left there wondering where the children were. And I know I feel bad that it's not a true story. I didn't make it up.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, my heart was there. I lived there. I lived among the people, studied music and played music there and learned the language. And so when I came home, people say, "Oh, do you speak?" I said, "I love the people of Yugoslavia." And then the war broke out. It did affect me, but I was not there during the war. I've been back since. Just was there this summer, and you don't. I was in Croatia, and it's beautiful and great place to go for traveling. Not very cheap; it's pretty expensive. But
Yeah.
the scars are still there. People who are Serbian still don't talk to people who are Croatian, and it's a real shame. It's a real shame. They used to be so unified among their basketball players and they're great swimmers and they have a lot of sports loves and now they're not unified anymore. But that's where the song came from. And so yeah, I guess the first couple things we've talked about seem to kind of suggest that I get very moved by things, and the only way to really express myself is through music. Even though I blab a lot, I talk a lot, but I find that music is the words, is the feelings between the notes. Sorry,
Yeah.
let me say it. my my music are the notes between the words. It's the feelings that I can't really portray. And when I want to say something super deep or super meaningful, music is really the way I do it.
Hmm. I was one thing I did want to say though is you have the emphasis on children praying. Um, do you have a specific, you seem to have a heart for children. Is there a reason that you think that was fostered in you, or is that just what first comes to mind when you think of victimhood and war?
Yeah, I mean, well, I have children, but that's not really what precipitated that. I think I just look at innocent people, and I tend to in my life, I tend to always reach out to the people that are, the homeless people that I see, they're with childlike innocence on the streets. Sometimes I feel bad for the kids who are handicapped. I have two handicapped children that have spina bifida. My two oldest daughters have spina bifida. So not only are they children, but they have a lot of things where they rely on other people's help. Um, I guess I just look at that. It's like, who are the people suffering the most? And they can't help themselves. They're at our whim. We adults who kind of mess things up. It's like the kids just go, why do you hate each other? Why are you doing this? We just want to play. We just want to be happy. Maybe it's because I'm a bit immature. I'm kind of a kid myself. And I feel like I just want to be in that childlike happy place. Maybe we should all grow up and act like children.
Yeah. What was childhood like for you? Because I know you were influenced, like you did grow up with a musical family, right?
Yeah, I had a good childhood. I'm from Wisconsin. When I was there, my family that had been in Wisconsin, some of them were very musical, so I had music in my family. Later on, I found out that maybe things in my family, my extended family, weren't so peaceful. But I was raised in a very peaceful home, and but there's one thing about me that I've discovered now that looking back, I've always hated friction. So when I was a kid and somebody would get in a fight, I would always run away. I
Okay.
still do that to this day. I don't like to see people fighting, whether it be politics or in my family or guys that I play basketball with or whatever. I don't like when people get angry. It goes counter to the harmonious, I guess, nature of who I want to be and who I try to be. So my childhood was good. I had, I'm the oldest of four kids. We all got along. Once in a while, we get in a few fights like kids do. My dad was a coach, a swimming coach, and he was kind of a rough guy. Growing up, pardon my French, but I used to think my middle name was Damn It. My dad was pretty aggressive, and but he loved me and he was very proud of me. My mom is is pretty amazing. Let me tell you a story about my mom, which ties into maybe another reason I do what I do. When I was a kid, I sit down at the piano. I hated to practice. I don't trust people who like to practice piano. Uh, so I'd sit down and I'd practice the piano, and I just hated it. I wanted to quit. And my mom came in one day. She said, Kurt, put your music away. So, oh, great. I get to quit like all my friends. No, no, no. I don't want you to quit. I just play me what you think a sunrise sounds like. What? She said, I hear you all the time just kind of messing around on the piano. You're not playing your Bach or Beethoven, you're playing Bestor. And she said, just play me something. Now, I was probably 11, and I'm sure what I played was not great, but she made me feel kind of like Beethoven that day. And
Yeah.
my mom's still alive. She's 92. And whenever I have a piece of music, I always play it for her first and say, hey, mom, what do you think? And
Wow.
one of these days, I think I'll probably write a book about creativity called Play Me a Sunrise. Because I think that was what a wonderful thing for me to sit down and it was okay for me to make up music, and it made me feel like I was really worth something. And I'm sure that's why I do what I do,
Hmm.
because that's where I get my joy. That takes me to my happy place. When I do feel that friction that I said I don't like, I usually come down and sit in front of my keyboard and write music, and it just takes me to a good place.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I've spoken with some musicians who are very strict on practicing. I mean, it's like 3 hours a day or more. I mean, it's just their life. And so when they finally get to, they practice, practice, practice rigorously so that whatever they play kind of reflects that excellence of what they want it to be. Um, and it's still, I mean, a lot of times, I mean, it's still beautiful when it comes out, and you can see the work that's gone into it. But for you, is your philosophy like, have you practiced rigorously your entire life to then see these really beautiful results? Or for you, is it just basically, I don't want to say basically, but is it more of an imaginative, artistic, you kind of just let the emotions go and feel that as opposed to really vigorously following some sort of strict schedule or something like that.
Well, let me explain it this way, because I think it'll be easy for people who don't write music to understand, or to play music. I look at music as two things. One is the craft of music, that is playing the piano, playing trumpet, writing music, putting it down. It's the craft of it. Then I look at the art of it, which is harder to know where that all comes from. That inside stuff, the emotion. I
Yeah.
don't want my craft to get in the way of my emotion. I want I want to be able to say what the deepest things that I need to say, the happiest things, the saddest things, the ang whatever, and I don't want my craft to get in the way. So your friends that practice all day long like that, that I admire that. They just have to be careful that they don't think that attaining their art, their craft, their technique is the most important thing. I tell this all the time when I work with violin. I have a violin friend who's she's practiced like that 6 hours a day, went to Peabody, Curtis, what all these music schools. I wrote her an arrangement of Yesterday by the Beatles. And it's a tough one to play, but she worked on it, practiced it, got it down. We went in and played in the studio. I played piano, she played that. When we got done, she goes, "Hey, I didn't make any mistakes." I said, "No, you didn't." Well, why are you? She goes, "Why don't are you not responding like with glee?" And I said, "Because it wasn't perfect emotionally. Yeah, you played all the notes, but I'd rather have a few out of tune notes, but perfect emotion. I'd rather have
Hmm.
someone sing and crack a note, but get the perfect emotion than to just play. Wow, did you see how fast I could play the piano? Did you see how I didn't play any wrong notes? That's just a means to that emotional end. So
Hmm.
I have to be good enough at piano and composing that I don't let my craft get in the way. But I don't consider myself a piano player. I mean, I'm pretty good, but I'm a trumpet player too, and I'm pretty good. But I'm really a composer. I know how to write for other people, and then I let them bring their technique and marry it with my emotion, and then
Hmm.
that's my voice.
Do you find though that it can be easy to let the craft kind of go aside for the emotional experience of music?
Well, I have pretty high standards for myself. My craft is, learning how to write for instruments, learning the harmonies, learning the counterpoint, learning how to get an orchestra all put together. And I'm a I'm a stickler for not coming up with just the same old thing. I can write a melody. It's like, real quick. Oh yeah, that's a nice melody. But oh, I've heard that before. Kurt, you can do better than that. And I try to push myself to write something even better, even more unique, and something that conveys the message even better. So I tend to be the opposite of letting it slip, because I'm not satisfied unless I get the perfect emotion I'm looking for, not
Hmm.
just the technique to play it, but I want my score paper to reflect exactly what I want the orchestra then to play. And that's pretty cool for me. That's why I'm a composer, because I can sit and write something in my head in a score. I'm going to show you a score. You know what a score looks like. But it's got all these notes and all these dynamics and all the articulations. And then when I stand in front of the orchestra and I conduct, all that comes back at me. It's like my brain exploded. It's like, wow, that was me. And now I'm pretty good at guessing what it's going to sound like. And I don't know. But I look at John Williams. He's 92 years old and he's
Yeah.
still reaching for the stars. That was kind of a bad metaphor, but I am the same way. I mean, I don't. You can look it up how old I am, but I feel as if I'm still trying to make it. Like I'm not there. I still can get better. I can get better and better, and I hope that I go to my grave just trying to get better in how I write music and communicate. That's that's what I think. I'm trying to do.
Isn't that stressful though? Because what if you don't achieve what you think it should be?
No, that's the good thing. And I think if I were to give any to advice to someone who was doing what I do, you got to know when to say when. Now I work for a lot of clients, so sometimes the deadlines are when the orchestra is going to meet, and then my suit better be done. And I just serve it. And then sometimes I hear things and I go, well, like if I listen to something, in fact, you brought up Rigoletto. Actually, yesterday I was rearranging Rigoletto, the song Melody Within, for an orchestra I'm going to perform with. They wanted to sing that song, and I didn't have the orchestration for full orchestra. So I was I hadn't pulled that out for years, and I'm thinking, it's a good song. Man, maybe I could have done that a little different. But I kind of leave things where they are. It's like what I wrote 20, 30 years ago. Yeah, it's fine. It's great. I don't go back and fret about it. I move on to the next thing. And so it's never really stressful. I just want to make the clients happy. That's my job. But I'm usually pretty happy with what I do. Maybe I'm cocky. I don't know. I just feel I don't stress about it. I don't rework things a lot. I don't go back and redo it and redo it and redo it. And there's some guys that do that. And I think, wow, that would be a nightmare. Groundhog Day. Just keep regurgitating your song. Oh, I can get better. I can get better. I can get better. After a while, it's not even emotional anymore because you polished it so much, you
Yeah.
know?
What's I guess I was trying to hit on what's the pinnacle you want to reach when you're talking about getting better, better, better? Is there a specific pinnacle you have in mind when you say that?
I guess if the goal is to communicate, I want to just be able to communicate better to more people, not because I want them to buy anything, and who buys music anyway, but I just want to communicate those feelings that I think are important to communicate. I want to be better at that. If I were,
Okay.
Shakespeare, I'd want to invent new words and find a better way to write. Well, I'm a composer, so for me, I can I can learn how to write better for a violin in order to communicate better, in order for that violin to really feel it and to play. If I'm writing, for a conductor, how can I make his life a little better so that he can communicate what's on the page? Um, but I don't know. Question. I don't think I'll ever get. I'm going to be happy where I am. I'm happy right now with what I'm writing, but I'm hoping to get better. I have things I want to do. I've got songs that I want to try. They scare me a little bit. But all my friends are retiring, and I still don't feel like I've made it, which is kind of weird.
Is there like an emotion when you're talking about an emotion? Um, is there an emotion you find hard to portray in music? Because I feel like, sadness, happiness, those, I don't want to say they're easy because I'm not a musician, but they seem relatively well captured often in music. Is like there
Yeah.
an emotion that you think is difficult to convey well?
Yeah, so I did a ballet called based on The Secret Garden. And in that ballet, the easy stuff is the love pas de deux, or the angry, scary, spooky stuff. That's pretty easy because you are dealing with sounds that people know, scary sounds that are kind of discordant, or beautiful melodies. Yes, it's not easy to do it well, but I can get there quickly. The harder stuff are the nuances,
Hmm.
the things where you have to portray a little bit of irony, where maybe someone has this happy love, but maybe it's unattainable, so they're feeling love for someone, but they can't quite attain it. I mean, I'm trying to give some
Yeah.
examples. It's the subtle emotions. I think it'd be the same thing if somebody were an actor. Is it hard to cry? No, it's easy to cry. It's good. I can yell and scream and look angry. But what about, just a little bit of irony, or a little, just a little bit of super subtle emotions? Those are a little more difficult.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't even think of that. More subtle emotions, that's true. Um, what do you think's the hardest thing about being a musician?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's a very difficult profession to make a living at. I mean,
Yeah.
let's put Taylor Swift and people aside for a minute. Um, but most musicians, we just have to work our hands off to try and pay the bills. It's just not set up that way. I mean, I've lived long enough to have had my music on LPs and cassettes, and then they went
Yeah.
away and we had CDs, and then they went away, and now people go to Spotify and maybe they pay their $10 a month, but they can listen to a million songs, and I get teeny bit of every time somebody plays it. Now, if I'm Taylor Swift, and I thought we were going to forget her for a minute, I do like her, but if it she can make tons of money because there's tons of plays. But for a guy like me with kind of a niche classical, jazz, whatever music I do, there's not much money to be made. So how do you make money? But let me take it away from that. That's kind of gross to just talk about money. How do I keep my, for lack of a better word, my musical spirit clean while trying to make money? How do I stay true to the purpose that I think music has um, in the world? And I can talk about that later if you want. During COVID, I kind of discovered a few things about music that I thought were interesting. But I
Hmm.
have this idyllic, altruistic view of music, but I have to go out and write music sometimes that for people that aren't very talented, and I'm just kind of doing it. That's very difficult. Um, and I mean, I work like a madman 24/7 pretty much. I mean, I work all the time. So just trying to get balance in my life because I've learned one thing. You can sit down and write music all day and you think you're getting better, but sometimes I just need to go skiing. I'm a big skier. I go up in the mountains and I just ski and get away from it. And suddenly I'm all cleansed and my brain I come back and I write the best music by getting away from it.
Yeah.
That's hard too. But I would say the business side of it, the legal side, when I write music, who owns it? My song Prayer of the Children gets sung by thousands of choirs and it's all on YouTube. Um, there's not money that comes to me for that. I'm the owner of that music and yet it gets used to benefit lots of things. And I don't get too cranky about it, but every month when I got to write that mortgage payment, it's like, oh, it'd be
Yeah.
nice.
Why isn't that the case? Because aren't wouldn't you be given some sort of payment, or at least don't you
Oh
have to
yeah,
like?
no, hey, it's all set up. It's all set up so that we should get paid. Yes. But people don't. I mean, I'll give you an example. So a lot of my music is in sheet music.
Right.
Choir buys 5, 10 copies, but they got 60 people in the choir. So instead of buying all more copies, which would give me some money, they just go Xerox, they go copy 40 more and
Right.
they
Oh, I
don't think
see.
about it. I mean, nice people do that and they don't really think about it. People use my music behind their TikTok, Instagram, whatever because my music is kind of, it portrays moods. So once in a while I'll get some money but it's not always attributed to me. It's just hard. It's always been that way. I mean, musicians, we're maybe it's because we're not really very smart. We just do music. We're not smart businessmen. You read tons of stories about musicians getting taken advantage of by their manager and blah blah blah. I have a friend who's an artist. He's a wonderful painter, and he gets paid like 20 grand a painting. And
Hmm.
I thought to myself, wow, what if I wrote a song for a person, just one person, and that song is not to be played for anybody else. It's only for that person. I'm going to give it to him on sheet music. I'm going to do a recording. It's theirs. I spend as much time on that as he does on his painting. Why can't I get 25 grand for that? It's not set up that way. And I don't know. We could talk about this in the music business class, but it's just not set up. Music was set up by radio playing, now internet, masses of people listening, and but it's still an old model based on selling of albums in the old days. People would get their music on the radio, and then people would
Yeah.
go out and buy an LP, and they'd make a lot of money. When that went away, thanks to Napster, you're too young to remember, but the P2P sharing now, the internet, now it's just like, hey, listen to this, put this behind your presentation, do this, do this, do that. It should be easy to figure out who owns what, but for some reason it just slips through
Well,
the crack.
it's interesting though, because you're also saying that your desire for the music is to communicate emotion that people resonate with. And
Right.
that in of itself, that goal doesn't really fit a business model, which is difficult because you have like a
Yeah, well, I think I explained. I think I brought that up earlier, perhaps, but
yeah,
yeah, it's incongruous. It's like I should
it's
just
hard.
I should just give away everything for free because that's the beautiful thing to do, and I do quite a bit of that. But
Yeah.
it's a reality, the reality, and I guess that's why the question is how hard is it? What's the hardest part? The hardest part is trying to stay pure and musical and artistic while at the same time jumping in the money pit with all the
Yeah.
other people trying to make money. um, I wish that I could. In the old days, Mozart had King Leopold, who was his sponsor, and all the
Yeah.
composers in the old days, they all had patrons, and they would say, just get up and write me a string quartet for my Cheerios in the morning or something, Mozart, and then you can have the rest of the day off to play, play video games. So it's not like that, but every once in a while I joke about it, saying to my rich friends, "Hey, why don't you be my patron?"
Well, I do want to go back when you said about COVID, your philosophy of music. Do you want to elaborate on that a little more?
Yeah, ask that question again. Sorry.
Oh, I said just to elaborate on what you said earlier about COVID and music.
Oh yeah. So as a performer, because I do perform as well as write,
Yeah.
during COVID, I was it was shocking how much I missed the communication between an audience. When I say an audience, it can be me and six people in a front room, but we didn't even have that at first. We didn't, I
Yeah.
mean, my family, yes, but not just people I know. We had all my friends in the studio. We weren't I I really, really realized how much I missed that communication, that human to human, and then connecting with music, which is that deeper way in my mind of communicating. Man, I mean, I tried putting some things on the internet with some friends. Okay, I wrote this song, and then you sing in that, in the Zoom like boxes, right, on
Yeah.
Facebook or Instagram. It was fine, and I got a little bit of it, but that delayed gratification where somebody does a like or whatever, it wasn't always so
Or the
sincere sounding.
smile
Yeah,
freezes
that
and belly
smiley thing,
widens.
and it's
Yeah.
like people saying, "Oh, that is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." It lacks a little sincerity for me. But so a year went by, and I had no performances. I missed my Christmas concert, which I've done now for 36 years, a big Christmas show I do.
Yeah.
And I mean, I did it. I ended up doing it online with my orchestra masked, and we were in a studio, and I was the only one allowed to take my mask off. You remember that time? And but I remember a year after so it would have been like May of 2021, I guess. A year had gone by with the pandemic craziness. And there was like a window of time, maybe about May of 2021, where they thought, oh, things are getting a little bit better. I don't know
Yeah.
if it was that way with you, but it was that way here. And we got permission to do music from Andrew Lloyd Webber. So we had gotten permission from him. He worked with us. I was the musical director, and we did a show. It was crazy. We had to do drug tests and nasal swabs and all this kind of
Yeah.
stuff. We had to be inoculated, and the audience had to wear masks. It was super, super strict. But I'll never forget when I played this little unexpected song by Andrew Lloyd Webber, and behind the curtain, and then the curtain opened slowly, and the audience, you could just hear this and feel this incredible um, feeling. The audience was just like, "Oh, we've missed this."
Yeah.
And during COVID, at first I thought, what am I doing? I'm not a first responder. I'm not. I'm doing something that is considered kind of like a little frivolous thing. I write music, but then I realized that the arts truly make us human. That's how we, in other animals on the scale of, we're supposedly on the top. Other animals might, bird calls and so forth, but we're the ones who create, and we're the ones that create things, and that communication artistically, I think people really, really missed it. And when they finally could come back into the concert halls, and go, go to the art galleries and go to the plays. There was this
Yeah.
huge onslaught of people doing that. And I think it still continues. We just realized how much we missed connecting with other humans and through art. And that was kind of
Yeah.
what I felt better about it, about why I do what I do. Um, if you take my thought that music is the space between the words, when you can't quite say it, let me play some
Yeah.
music for you and you can feel it. And it's the old cheesy music is the universal language, blah blah, whatever. But it's really true, and I can't explain why it does that, but for me it does. And I'm so glad that coming out of the COVID pandemic, I was kind of reborn. Like, yeah, this is why I do what I do, so that we can connect. Which goes back to why I love children. Children, they don't even really see color. They don't see gender. They don't see any of that stuff. They just see their friend and they want to play. Only later do they learn all that stupid stuff, now. So I want to live in that childlike place. I want to live in that place because I think everybody needs to be reminded to go back to that in the concert hall, in the rock concerts, wherever you are, dance. That's what you're getting in touch with. Those really great emotions.
Hmm. Well, Kurt, I want to ask you one last question because I want to be respectful of your time. Um, you know, it's interesting. You kind of maybe tagged it in there at the end, but I was going to ask you, what is your hope? Not necessarily as a musician. I mean, it can be because I know that's such an integral part of who you are as a person. Um, but also, who you are just as a person because the world is, as you said, it's dark and um you contribute what you can, but also evil still remains. And a lot of times, similar to your song, where you're advocating for people to just love one another and care for one another and be compassionate so that people don't needlessly die. And there's all this death and sadness. Um, like for you, what is your hope in the midst of seeing, what's going on in Israel right now, what's going on all around the world, all these different, attacks and deaths and unfairness, no justice. What's your hope as you kind of look to the future with everything?
Well, my luckily I've done this for a while, and I realize that there is an analogous thing with what I do and life in general. In music, you've got to play with a big orchestra, and the flute player is way up here and the tuba player is way down here. They seem drastically different, but they figure out a way to play their part and be together so that they can be in tune. They can work together for a bigger goal of performing the symphony or whatever it is. You and I'm when I do my Christmas concerts here in Salt Lake City and around the West mostly, there are people there that are in their 80s. They think a lot differently than the people in their 20s, but
Yeah.
they come to a concert and for 2 hours, they are on the same wavelength somehow. And they're all focused on what I have to give them or what I'm, I don't, it's not all about me, but I'm kind of a control and I have my orchestra and my band and we're playing Christmas music, and for that 2 hours, they're unified. Now, I hope that I always tell them at the end of this year, I said, guys, this feeling we felt, because we had a really emotional performance this year. And I ended with a real beautiful song. And I said, man, I hate to leave. It's been a wonderful night. I said, that feeling you guys are feeling, wrap it up in a bow and pass it on. Give it to someone else. Try to capture that same feeling where you work. Just don't I feel hope. I feel hope that it's possible, even though there's just 2,500 people in the audience. It's not the entire world, but exponentially, we can do it. We can do it, between you and me on a podcast. And now the people that are listening, and if they feel something, they can say, oh, I listened to this podcast. I learned something. And or a song they listen to. I
Yeah.
just want to unify people. I want to unify people. I think we are much more powerful than we think we are. unified. We are right now, and I'm not gonna get into politics per se, but we're looking for someone to save us. Oh, we got to vote for this person or that person. They'll save us. They'll save us. You know what? No, they'll run the country, but we will do it. We on the ground, we in the orchestra, we on our podcast, we can unify. And that's one and I think if you
Hmm.
don't feel like shooting somebody if you're playing music with them. You don't feel like doing, defacing a wall with graffiti if you're painting. Arts can teach us something. And I think we've got to get in
Hmm.
touch with our artistic selves. All of us have the ability to be artistic, even if only a few of us are crazy enough to do composing.
Well, it goes back to your title. Actually, if you ever do write when you mentioned about your mom and sunrises, if you ever do write a book about your life, I think that's a good title.
It will be,
Um,
and I've been asked to write a book about my life, but I'm a little nervous to do that. So we'll consider this little 45 minutes together to be a little microcosm, a little look into the life of a crazed composer.
of the book, maybe, 20 years from now. This is
All
your
right, I'll come back and
inspiration.
we'll talk about the book. You'll still be podcasting.
Well, Kurt, I want to thank you so much. And again, listeners, I'll have his website in the podcast post so that you can take a look at it. His music's beautiful. I'm mentioning Rigoletto, which is, a long time ago. I thought it was beautiful, by the way. But, now I'm sure and I've heard of your concerts being pretty amazing and full of emotion. I think that's one of the biggest things I've heard about your concerts. So I do recommend just taking a look at, where he is and tour dates that are on his website and taking a look and diving into his music. But Kurt, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Danielle. It's been great.